Hi. What we're talking today is around data. So I'm going to do sort of we'd say a half an hour. They say 18 minutes is the maximum you should really spend on a presentation. So an interesting bit of data which we're going to ignore. But I don't think it will be 30 minutes, and hopefully it won't seem like that. Neil's going to be jumping in and doing a little bit in between. I've got a particular focus, the area that I come from. So we'll be talking about data quality, how you use data, how you collect it and store it is also part of this. It's very much becoming much more important now, data in terms of organisations. Government are focusing in on how you store it, how you use it, the protection of it, that kind of thing. But also it's becoming seen more important now in how you run your business and how you can improve your business and how you can manage your business, making good use of data. So we're going to sort of go through some of these things, and I'm going to have highlighted how do we use data, because that's the kind of bit that I'll be focusing on. I'm going to be spreading it quite thinly, so there's a whole load of bits that I'm going to be talking about very briefly that will give you an idea of the sort of things that data futurists can help with in the future and what other learning sessions we might be able to do, to give you a sort of bit of a taster of each, but then focusing in a bit more on the idea of how you use data and some of the pitfalls of that, particularly around one particular small area, just to make it a bit more interesting than just going across a whole range of topics. So my name's Tim Brooks. My background is in business improvement transformation. I'm a systems thinker. You use a systems thinking ways of working which is heavily based on evidence and data. My history is I've been in housing, social housing for a long period of time, local government, but I've also worked in the public and private commercial and charitable sectors. And in all of those areas I've seen the same issues with data, how it's used, how it's misused, how it's not used very well, and how there's been a lack of it when you need it. So, and that's happened, as I say, that seems to be across different kinds of organisation, including large commercial organisations that I've worked for. So, let's move on to the next slide. So what is R? There's a quite small question of is data or are data? Actually data is plural, so it is R data, but it doesn't really matter, it's used interchangeably these days, and I think only a pedant would probably pick up too much on whether it's R data or is data. But you'll see a slide in here that does refer to there are data. That's because it comes from some academic textbook or something, and that's how they use it. So, but the important thing is, what does it mean for us? So these are some of the things data are or data is. What does it actually mean, and how can it help us in business, and how can it help us improve the decision making? How can we use data to create statistics that we can interpret to create a picture of our business or our performance that helps us improve it or manage it? So you can have data that is assumed or not, is data that is wrong or misused, or you can have no data. So either of these are the wrong things. What we need is the right data and how to use it properly, and that's a little bit about what I'm going to be talking about. And obviously then, in terms of other areas that Neil might talk about a bit more when he has a session in a minute, is how we can use it to make sure you're compliant with organisations. So using data is to take a scientific approach, really, to how you manage your business. How you can use rationally, scientifically credible methods to understand how your performance is working, how you can study the data, relevant data, to understand how it works, taking an empirical approach, so understanding the observable data that you get, but then how you study that and what your theoretical framework is to understand that. So you bring a mental model, whenever you study data, you bring a mental model to it and you choose what it is that you study. And it's important to understand that theoretical framework that you're working from. Little quote from Einstein there, talking about how the theory behind what you observe is very important. That is, in fact, determines what it is that you observe. This is a bit from a theorist, a guy called Chris Argyris. I don't know if you've come across him. He's a business theorist who worked at Harvard. He was responsible for the development of learning organisations work and some of the early work on organisational development. And what he says here is basically you infer a lot from data, and sometimes that can be, you have to understand that you're inferring from that data. So you start with at the bottom of the ladder the data that you observe. So this is as if you are capturing it on a camcorder. This is just the experience, the raw information that you're getting. From that you select the data that you want to observe, and then as humans we add meanings, that might be cultural or personal meanings to that data, and make assumptions based on those meanings. Then you draw conclusions from that, and that then becomes part of your belief, your worldview. So you adopt beliefs about the world and then take actions based on the beliefs. But this arrow is quite important here, because then your beliefs shape the data that you end up selecting. So we've got to be aware of what we're doing, why we're asking that, and that's what I mean by our theoretical framework. And if you don't think you've got a theoretical framework, just ask yourself questions: why am I doing this? Why am I looking at this? Why am I asking these questions? The answer to that will be because you have a theoretical framework that leads you to ask those particular questions. So this is about what you can infer from that, and a little bit down the side is about how we learn, because data is very important for any organisation to understand and to learn about its performance. So it's I think very important to be aware of that and to understand those sort of theoretical basis on which you look at data. How can you improve using data? I'm going to talk a bit about managing using data shortly, but how can you improve or transform your business using data? So the important bit is why. Evidence-based change is the first point up there. Why do you want to change? What is it that's making you change? It's usually because you've got some evidence that suggests that something's not working as well as it could, or that you could improve, or that you need to do more with less and become more efficient with what you're doing. Using data can help your understanding and help you build a case for change. Using data, and then your change will be based on real evidence rather than on opinion or whim, which I know in my experience does happen. And so you get a lot of change based on a lot of opinions. You get a lot of opinions in a room, and people decide this is what they ought to do, but there's no evidence behind it, there's no data to back that up. So not only can data help you build a case for change, it can then help you understand if you are changing. So you can then monitor and measure the change that you're happening using that data. So it's vital to be able to not only understand if you need to change, but then to understand if you are actually managing to change. It enables an understanding of performance, and it's also important that when you get the right quality of data, that means also understanding the data itself, but also understanding what data you need to understand. So what data are you actually going to go and look for? Are you choosing the right data? And using all this, it gives you an enhanced ability to improve your business, to transform that. It's about having the right amount of data, the right data and the right amount of data, not too much, because too much is too much, the right amount, the appropriate amount to achieve the purpose that you're trying to achieve. And making sure your measures are related to your purpose, and again I'll talk briefly a little bit about measures and what's a good measure shortly, and then also how you can distinguish between leading and lagging measures. So we often focus on the lagging measures. These are the measures we report up the hierarchy, things that board members and senior managers like to see. These are kind of the rear view mirror. How have we been doing? What have the costs been? How did we perform last month? And your leading measures, which are the measures that you can use in the work for your frontline managers and your frontline staff to understand how it's going, how you can use that to improve what you're doing on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. So we'll distinguish between those as well. So I'll hand quickly over back to Neil, who's going to ask you if your organisation's ready.
So looking at, in terms of organisational readiness, do people make decisions with their heads or their hearts? So all around, they use the data to drive the decisions they make, or as Tim was talking about, the emotions, their opinions and their experiences which they bring, but actually the empirical basis for how to make decisions. People have all their data, which is good quality, without gaps, to make those decisions. If you don't have that information underlying that, you can't move to the step where you are fully engaged with. And when you ask a question, is it like swimming through treacle, or is it just very quick, seamless, you get the information that you need every time, very straightforward? And okay, so what we're trying to do first as data futurists is help people to get the basics right, rather than jumping onto all of these fancy things, so things like machine learning, predictive analytics, look at, get the essentials right. Automation, you can make your work quicker and more effective for automation. That's straightforward. Self-service, enabling customers to do the work for themselves, or internal customers to do the work for themselves by having your information in the system set up in a way that supports them to do this. Data quality, making sure you have the right information available, accurate, complete, all the things that you need. Governed, so people are actually looking after the information you have. People have put laws in place, resources in place to do this work. Utilising data-driven tools, there's a whole bunch of tools which we'll be looking at, which are all things we could consider later on as future topics. Building on the Lean toolkit, the systems thinking toolkit, and some Fusion ones that we've created ourselves. And then data-driven thinking, exactly what Tim was saying around the thoughts people have. Are they using their opinions and arguments, or are they using the information to drive that particular decision or drive the debate? And you can measure that you are making a positive difference with that information afterwards. So some of the things to avoid for now, machine learning. So you spend a lot of money working in machine learning until you get your data right. So that would be a bit of a nightmare. Predictive analytics, very good, but again you need to have a good block of information to build on before you can go into that. Big data, well, lean data is a better term. So have the right information you need at the right time, complete and good quality. Because of algorithms, it's basically the stats way of saying machine learning. So having an algorithm which learns upon itself and loops back into itself. I won't go into too much detail about that. Data science, it's kind of a bit of everything and all these, and artificial intelligence, so that's Terminator.
That's me.
Back over to Tim.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's quite important that there's some great breakthroughs in terms of things like you say machine learning and some of the things that can be done, and sometimes we're quite keen to jump on this. I've worked in an organisation that was very keen to try and develop new types of technology and look at how we might develop some of those ideas, but weren't even able really to collect data on whether our repairs people were turning up on time regularly or how many calls we were getting that were as a result of the fact that we'd failed to do something right the first time. So until we get those basics right, maybe we need to walk before we can run and start doing some of the more fancy things. Let's get the basics right. Let's understand how our performance is working, have the tools to be able to study that as well. So I talked a bit about how you use data for improvement. In day-to-day management, we also need data to be able to understand how we're doing and to make decisions about what we need to do next. So there is good and bad data, and what do we mean by that? Well, good data is stuff that actually helps us to improve or to manage our business. Bad data is stuff that is unhelpful, either because it's spurious or wrong, is collected badly, it doesn't help us make decisions or helps us make the wrong decisions. And what could this mean? Well, if your source of your data is poor, if you're not collecting it correctly, or it's a bad source, then whatever information comes out, however you set it up or collect it or hold that, that's not going to help you. That's going to be pointing you in the wrong direction. And an example of that, I guess, is data collection. For example, things like survey methodology. Are you doing that right? Are you using proper techniques, effective techniques for surveys, and then interpreting that information correctly? Are they credible, sound techniques? So getting right to the root of not just how you manipulate the data, but what it is that you're looking at. Are you collecting it in an efficacious way to start with? So I'm going to talk about two little examples here, and there are plenty more. And as I say, Data Futurists can help you with all of the things that are bullet pointed here in more detail, and we can do more sessions in more detail on any one of these. But just to look quickly, looking at good, you can collect good data. It can be good, but you can look at it in a suboptimal way. So how you then present that data and try and understand it will affect what you do, whether it's good or bad at source. So as an example, we'll talk about averages. So each of these boxes contain a number of things. It's, as I told you, fish in a net, voids in a month, calls handled per day, repairs carried out per day, cats per block. Why you want to know how many cats per block, I'm not sure. But as you can see, the stars represent how many in each, and there's a variation per month. Let's say it was voids, for instance. What we often look at is averages. And averages are focused on a lot. I've seen this in housing, I've seen this in local government and in the private sector. And we get very focused on what the average is. But knowing that the average of that is 4.4, say it was voids, for instance, say you're looking at housing voids, that isn't really going to help you manage your business very well, knowing that it's 4.4 on average, because if you set up your system to cater for an average of 4.4 per month, well, you know, how many months are you going to be either over capacity or under capacity looking at that? So an average is a blunt tool. It's useful as a sort of a broad way of looking at things. It's useful as a part of a number of different bits of data that you can use to understand, and obviously people like senior managers and boards like to see the average of things, but it's also, I think, useful, and it's quite important to try and maybe educate upwards to show that actually the average is just a part of the picture, and there's a bigger picture out there. And what could that bigger picture be? Well, if we look at it in a different way, so the same data plotted over time series, for instance, if it was voids, this is made up, this is completely just made up, random information put in, you can get a bit different picture of what you're looking at. So the average is 4.4, but you can also see there's massive variation in the data over a period of time. So using information in that way can help you understand more how that part of your business is performing, and then help you manage that better. On there you've got plotted the average in an upper control limit, and in another session, if anybody was interested, we could do more work on looking at statistical process control charts, or capability charts as they're sometimes called, and how you can use that to understand variation over time, and how you can use that to understand what your common cause of variation and your special cause of variation are. But I won't go into that in detail now. What I want to focus on now is a particular aspect of what I've seen a lot in housing, particularly people get focused on in some senior management areas, and boards get quite focused on this, is the idea data set out in this way can show you what the actual performance was in different times, as long as you don't reduce it to averages. These are actual numbers. So what we often see focus on particular numbers. So you'll see this has gone up, this red, that's bad, pay attention to this, take action, do something about this number because it looks bad, it's red, it's gone up. And that really doesn't give you the full picture of what's going on, because if you look at that data then in time series, you'll see that that's the full picture. What you're focusing on is this bit. Those numbers have no significance. And what we do in organisations, many organisations, is to focus on two numbers that are actually, they look different but they're not really different. They're part of a normal pattern of variation. What we need to be looking at is, why is that variation there? Why do we have this variation in our performance? Then you can start asking the questions about, getting deeper into the questions that will help you improve services or manage your services better. So what we're doing with that is simply focusing on that bit. All of that data, we focus on 2 points, and either if it's good, if it's going up because it's good, we'll celebrate, and if it's not, we'll panic and do something, probably the wrong thing, to try and rectify that problem. So using that to make decisions is not going to be a good thing. Thinking about variation and the wider, broader set of data is going to help much more in understanding that. This shouldn't be a red alert, it's business as usual. And the question, as I say, is, why is it so varied? These are the sort of questions we need to ask. Just another quick example, just to rub it in a bit. So we've got two bits of data here that might have gone up 1 year on another. So that was monthly, the last one. This one's yearly. It's gone down from August last year. That's good, that's green. And it's gone up from November to this year. That's bad, that's red. If we look at that, simply in time series, we're looking at two figures that might have gone up or down, but as you can see, if you look at the whole pattern, they're not significant numbers. And again, same story as last time. So that's an important thing that we need to think about when we're looking at how we present data and how we understand data when we've extracted it. So how can trying to improve for services, how can you make an improvement without good data? I'd say you can't. I guess there is ways in which it's been done, or attempted to be done, that people have thought about making improvements, and that is, we'll put it all in we'll write it all up in an action plan and then pray for a miracle, I think is the approach. But understanding what the data is, where you are now and where you want to get to, is key. How do you know what needs to improve unless you've got data to tell you what you need to improve, or data that tells you that something's not working as well as it might? And how can you tell if you're improving unless you measure that and collect data to understand, monitor and measure with the use of appropriate tools and ways of displaying it that help you understand? Of course, there are dangers of using bad data or data misuse, as I've just explained, and often, and this back to the theoretical framework, we can focus on the wrong thing. Sometimes, and I've seen this happen quite a lot, people take the data they want to take, use the data they want to reinforce an idea they already have, to justify a decision that they're already thinking of making. And very often you might have heard of the phrase, projects that are doomed to succeed. They will succeed, we'll create the data that shows they succeed, but we haven't really achieved our objectives. And if you've ever been on a project management course, they always start by saying 75% of projects fail. Well, that might be one of the reasons that if we're not using the right data. And study the current state systematically. That means understand where you are now. So use the data and systematically study that. And it's how you study that and what you're looking for and this theoretical framework behind it that will determine the data that you extract and how you use that data. So now I'm going to show you some hopefully amusing slides that I stole from a policeman. This policeman is a guy called Inspector Guilfoyle. He's a systems thinking policeman he's written a book called Intelligent Policing. Some say contradiction in terms, but he wants to make it more intelligent, and he's done a lot of talks and written this book about what's wrong with the statistics they use in policing. He's talked about binary comparisons and how we focus a lot on crime stats up this month, down from last year, when actually that data actually doesn't mean. He talks a lot about use of targets and how damaging they are in the police service, but also how you can use useful measures. So his example here, which is taken from a blog that he writes. Simon Guilfoyle is his name, by the way, Inspector Simon Guilfoyle. He's still doing the rounds. He looks at the cockpit in an airplane and says, right, useful measures. These are the sort of things you know, they're being measured in a sensible way, and they're things you need to know if you're flying a plane. Good measures, that's what we need. Less useful measures, and you may have seen not these exact types of things, and obviously these are a bit silly, but within housing and local government organisations, we tend to measure a lot of things. We have baskets of PIs, as long as your arm, and they're all key as well. They're all key performance indicators. So I was often asked, well, what's the key performance indicators then? Because 75 is obviously too many. And we collect data on all kinds of things that are not business critical things or not as important. It might be useful to collect it, but is it sensible to pay attention to it in the way that we do? So we might collect the wrong kind of data. That's not going to help you fly a plane. If we do the same thing using the binary comparisons, again, you'll see not going to be much use when you're actually up in the air trying to work out how fast you're going and what speed you need to be to make a landing. And then, of course, the final, no data, just as bad. Not going to help you either. As you see, no data is just as bad as bad data. Just having data it's got to be good, it's got to be effective data that you're using. So one of those was good, 3 of those not so good. So that's just something about how data and measures can be used. I said I'd talk about measures. What's a measure that's useful in an organisation? What's a good measure? Well, these are some of the things that from systems thinking learning, and I got from learning from Deming in his work, and from John Seddon in some of the work that he's done for the Vanguard systems thinking, is what makes a good measure? What are you measuring? Are you measuring the right thing? Does your measure relate to the purpose of what you're trying to do? So if you've got a customer service system, are you measuring the purpose in customer terms? Because as a business that deals with customers, that's what you need to be thinking about. Are you doing the right thing for the customer, and are you measuring that? Good businesses that thrive make sure that they understand how they're meeting their objectives in terms of their customers. Does your measure demonstrate variation over time, as I've shown in some of the previous slides? Does the information you get facilitate learning and understanding? So it leads to knowledge about how your system works, and therefore better knowledge about how you might change that to improve that, and what's going right and wrong with it? And does it facilitate that learning within the teams that do the work? So are measures being used by those in the work to monitor and control the work and improve the work? Usually I'd say the case was that isn't the case, and people's measures are usually something that get produced to feed up the hierarchy and are not commonly used in the front line to understand what's happening this week, how are we doing, what do we need to do to change, how can we improve what we do. And it's used by managers in the front line to act on the system, to predict, plan, make the best use of resources that you have in order to manage into the future. I think it was Deming who said the art of management is the art of prediction. How can you know what's coming up? Only by using data and solid data about how things are now. So when you're actually collecting data, what are you measuring? What are you actually collecting it on? This is an important way of thinking about that. Sort of heads up on this. There's a report from Nesta, the sort of think tank, who have done this report on using data in government and public services, as well as the government have got a transformation strategy as well, which is more to do with how data is used in government, but it's spreading across public services and into third sector areas as well. And I've highlighted the top one because I think that's the key to it all. There's no point in data unless you're going to use it for something and that it leads to some action. And if you use the right data, good data in the right way, it will lead to positive action. Also, the one at the bottom, it's not just about the right technology. It's not about having the right technology to collect and store data. It's about, they say culture, skills and leadership. I'd use the word knowledge. It's about understanding, maybe that comes within skills. It's about having the knowledge to understand how to use that data, how to collect that data and how to use that data in the right way. And I think that's absolutely essential. So, in summary, this is why data-driven. And there's a little quote there in the orange box, which is from the MIT Centre for Digital Business, which I don't know if you can probably read it at the back. So organisations driven most by database decision making had 4% higher productivity rates and 6% higher profits. It just makes for a more efficient business, basically, more effective and efficient business, and also obviously helps comply with what's required from regulators. So that's all I've got to say, actually. Hopefully that has given a kind of a broad view of some of the things that data futurists might be able to help with, and a range. And I think it's more of a, apart from the little bit in the middle which I wanted to put in to sort of give some idea about how we might be able to talk about how you use data and data quality, a sort of a broad sweep of the range of areas that we can probably go into more detail in, looking at some of the more specifics in some of those areas that we could do either in these coffee mornings or as a part of the work that data futurists do. Works with each other. And so, again, as the Japanese say, the fish rots from the head. This is about senior leadership in organisations and making sure that those things work together and that there's a drive to make sure those things do link and that you don't get these silos appearing. And a lot of that's to do with the structure of the organisation, how it works, and that we're very keen in modern management age of separating out functions into specialised areas and then having handoffs between them and maybe setting up service level agreements between parts of your own organisation. But we're not so, and it's a plausible set of ideas. You get these economies of scale from doing that, but what you lose is an economy of flow. So you sometimes don't have that link up between things because you're not understanding your organisation as a system. So the people who are working in it aren't working in an organisation that's set up to work as a system. So it is a people problem, I think, but that people problem is generated by a wider organisational issue. And as I think that goes to the top of the organisation, which is a very much more difficult nut to crack because you're talking about changing the way people think. To be able to learn in one way, you need to unlearn some of the things you already think are right, and that's a very hard nut to crack. Certainly in terms of big data, I know that there's some work that was done up in Stoke where they actually, a very ambitious project where they tried to work with a load of different public sector organisations, the NHS, the fire service, the local government, and the problems they had accessing each other's data because of regulations around that and because it's stored in different ways and kept was huge. They managed to persevere and actually break that down and actually get some link up between that. And I think it has actually sparked some ideas amongst some of the people in government that actually this might be a way we need to start thinking. Instead of thinking about these as separate bits of service, these are all providing a service to people sometimes. I mean, what they originally discovered in Stoke was that the biggest burden on their services across all of this, NHS, social care, fire service, local government, came from about 5% of the population. So if you have alcohol problems, you're more likely to have children who've got social care problems, you're more likely to have a fire in your home, you're more likely to put more burden on the local authority services. And yet all of this data is kept separately and independently, and we just refer people from one place to another. So they found out that these people were having thousands of transactions with all these different organisations each year, which is costing a huge. Not only were they not getting the help they needed to recover or to sort out their problems, it was actually costing a fortune in just passing people one to another. So that's when they started trying to link it up. And I think they've made some progress. They've done some studies, and it's shown that when you do try and link up and you do try and understand that what you're doing is providing a whole range of services to a person in a place, and that then the way we've divided up the services isn't necessarily the most natural and right way of providing them, they've actually begun to ask the right questions and crack that nut, and that's led to them beginning to understand that they need to share that data, and that's about bringing all that data together, and then you've got fairly big data.